The first time I realized my family had already decided my future without me was the night my name disappeared from a document I had helped build for over a decade. Not metaphorically, literally disappeared. I'm Evelyn Hartman. I was 32 years old when I opened the revised shareholder agreement for Hartman & Company on my laptop at 11:47 p.m., sitting alone in my apartment, and saw that my ownership percentage had been reduced to 0. No warning, no conversation, no explanation, just gone. At that moment, I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I didn't even feel angry yet. What I felt was something colder and much heavier. Confirmation. The kind that settles in your chest when something you've suspected for years finally shows its teeth. Let me rewind, because nothing like this ever starts with a single act of betrayal. It starts with small permissions, quiet assumptions, family habits you're trained not to question. I grew up in Cedar Falls, Iowa, in a family that ran a regional furniture manufacturing business. Hartman & Company wasn't glamorous. We didn't make headlines. But we were stable, profitable, respected. My grandfather founded the company after World War II. My father, Thomas Hartman, inherited it. And from the time I was 16, it was understood that my older brother Daniel would inherit it next. What was less openly discussed was my role. I was the dependable one, the organized one, the one who stayed late to fix inventory errors, rewrote vendor contracts, and quietly kept the books balanced when things got messy. I earned an MBA. Daniel barely finished college. But Daniel was the son. I was the daughter who helped. That distinction never needed to be said out loud. It lived in the pauses, in who spoke during meetings, in whose mistakes were smoothed over, and whose competence was treated as expected, not exceptional. By the time I was 29, I was Chief Operations Officer in everything but title. The official org chart called me Operations Manager. Daniel was Vice President. My father was still CEO, though he hadn't stepped foot on the factory floor in years. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every birthday dinner circled back to the same jokes. "Evelyn's the backbone," my mother would say, smiling as she passed the gravy. "She's so reliable," my aunt would add, like that was the highest praise imaginable. Reliable is what you call someone you expect to give without asking. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I wasn't doing this for recognition. I was doing it for the company, for the family legacy, for stability. That lie worked. Until it didn't. The first crack appeared the Christmas my 30th birthday was forgotten. Not delayed. Forgotten. We were all at my parents' house. Snow outside, fire going, gifts under the tree. Daniel's kids tearing into wrapping paper. My mother handed Daniel a watch. My father gave his grandchildren envelopes with savings bonds. I waited. Nothing. I told myself they'd remembered, but planned something later. Dessert came. Coffee. Conversation shifted to Daniel's upcoming promotion within the company. Finally, my mother frowned slightly and said, "Oh, Evelyn, we'll celebrate you next time. Things have just been so hectic." I smiled. I always smiled. That was when I noticed something else. Daniel didn't look surprised. He didn't look guilty either. He looked comfortable, as if he already knew I'd accepted. A few months later, my father asked me to spearhead negotiations for a new supplier contract. It was complicated. Cross-state logistics, labor compliance. I spent 6 weeks on it. When it closed, Daniel presented the results at the board meeting. I was thanked, in passing. That was the pattern. I did the work. Someone else claimed the authority. Still, I stayed. Because leaving felt like abandonment. Because I was raised to believe loyalty was virtue, even when it cost you. Then came the email. Updated shareholder agreement. Please review. It arrived on a Tuesday night, sent by the family's longtime attorney, Martin Keller. He'd been handling Hartman legal matters since before I was born. I almost didn't open it. I assumed it was routine. Adjusted language, estate planning updates. I clicked. Scrolled, and there it was. Daniel Hartman, 62%. Thomas Hartman, 38%. Evelyn Hartman, not listed. I scrolled back up, thinking I'd missed something. I searched my name. Nothing. My stomach didn't drop. It locked. I checked the version history. My previous stake, a modest but meaningful 18%, had been removed in the latest revision. The effective date was set for the following week. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Did you see the email? We'll explain soon. Don't worry. Don't worry. I closed my laptop and sat there in silence, listening to the refrigerator hum. 32 years old, 12 years in the business, and my future had just been rewritten without my consent. I thought about calling my father, then my brother, then Martin. I didn't. For the first time in my life, I understood something with absolute clarity. If I reacted emotionally now, I would lose whatever leverage I still had. So I did what I'd always done, I observed. The next morning, I went to work as usual. Answered emails, approved shipments, sat in meetings. Daniel avoided eye contact. My father was overly cheerful. At lunch, my mother stopped by the office unannounced. She sat across from me, folded her hands, and said, "We didn't think ownership mattered so much to you. You're so independent." That sentence told me everything. They didn't think ownership mattered to me because they never intended to let me have it. That night, I printed the agreement. Every page. I read it slowly, like evidence. And that's when I noticed the clause. A quiet line near the end. Buried. Legal language dense enough to discourage curiosity. Any shareholder removed from ownership forfeits claims to past contributions, unless contested within 30 days. They weren't just excluding me. They were erasing me. I didn't sleep. By morning, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a plan, and I was done being the reliable one who absorbed the cost. I opened my contacts and scrolled until I found a name I hadn't used in years. Laura Bennington, corporate litigation attorney, former client of a competitor. Someone my father disliked because she asked too many questions. I dialed. When she answered, I said, "Laura, I need to know how to reclaim what was taken from me." Quietly, legally, completely. She paused, then said, "Tell me everything." As I began to speak, I felt something shift. Not relief, not anger, control. And that was the moment my family's version of this story began to fall apart. The first thing Laura told me was not to confront anyone. "Not your father, not your brother, not your mother," she said, her voice calm in the way only lawyers who've seen everything can manage. "If they think you're emotional, they'll frame this as family drama. If they think you're quiet, they'll underestimate you. We want the second." We met in her office in Des Moines 2 days after the email. Glass walls, neutral colors, a bookshelf that held more case law than decoration. She didn't offer sympathy. She offered clarity. "Tell me exactly how long you've been with the company," she said. 12 years, I replied. Full-time, no breaks. "And your role?" "Operations, contracts, vendor negotiations, internal audits, payroll oversight when our controller was sick for 6 months." She nodded, already typing. "And your compensation compared to your brothers?" I hesitated. "Lower, always lower." "By how much?" "Last year, about 40%. She stopped typing and looked at me. "Did you ever formally contest that?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I was told loyalty mattered more than money. Because I was raised to believe asking for more was selfish. Because I thought if I proved myself long enough, they'd eventually see me." I didn't say any of that. I just said I trusted them. Laura didn't react. She simply said, "Trust doesn't replace contracts." That sentence stayed with me. She pulled the shareholder agreement toward her, flipped through it, and circled several sections in red pen. "They removed you through amendment, not sale," she said. "That means they're claiming you agreed implicitly." "I didn't," I said. "I know, and that's the problem for them." She explained it slowly. The company had grown significantly in the last 8 years. New facilities, new accounts, increased valuation. And most of that growth happened under my operational oversight. "If you can demonstrate material contribution tied to company growth," she said, "they can't just erase your equity without compensation. Family business or not." I felt something loosen in my chest. Just slightly. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Documentation, emails, contracts you negotiated, proof that your role wasn't symbolic." I almost laughed. "I have everything." She smiled for the first time. "Good. Then here's what we do next." She leaned forward. We don't stop them from filing the agreement. We let it go through. My stomach tightened. Why? Because once it's filed, it becomes evidence, a formal act of exclusion. And then we respond. Respond how? With a claim they won't see coming. I left her office with a checklist and a deadline. 30 days before the forfeiture clause expired. 30 days to decide whether I was willing to stop protecting people who had never protected me. At work, nothing changed on the surface. Daniel still chaired meetings. My father still called me kiddo in front of staff. My mother still dropped by with muffins and questions about whether I was too stressed. But underneath, everything had shifted. I started forwarding emails to a private folder. Saved drafts, screenshots, notes from meetings where decisions were attributed to Daniel that I had made. One afternoon, I overheard Daniel on the phone in his office. "She'll calm down," he said. "She always does." I didn't interrupt. That evening, my parents invited me to dinner. It wasn't framed as a confrontation. It never was with them. It was family time. Lasagna, salad, familiar chairs around a table I'd sat at my entire life. My father cleared his throat halfway through the meal. "We wanted to explain the shareholder thing," he said. I waited. "Daniel needs clear authority going forward," he continued. "Investors respond better to simplicity." "What investors?" I asked calmly. He waved a hand. "Potential ones. Down the line." My mother jumped in. "And you're so capable on your own, Evelyn. You don't need ownership to be secure." There it was again. Daniel didn't speak. He just watched me. "So this was planned," I said. My father frowned. "Planned is a strong word." "Then what word would you use for removing my stake without telling me?" Silence. My mother reached across the table and touched my hand. "You're part of this family. That's more important than paperwork." I pulled my hand back gently. "Paperwork is what makes promises real." Daniel finally spoke. "You're overreacting. You'll still have your job." That was the moment. Not the email, not the missing name. That sentence. "You'll still have your job." As if that was something they were generously allowing. I looked at my brother. Really looked at him. He'd never once asked me how I felt about this. He'd never questioned whether it was fair. He'd simply accepted that the company would be his, and my role was to support that outcome. I stood up. "I'm not here to argue," I said. "I just wanted to understand." My father relaxed slightly. "Good. I understand now," I added. I left before dessert. The next morning, Laura called. "They filed the agreement," she said. "Effective date confirmed." "Okay," I replied. "Are you ready to proceed?" "Yes." We filed a notice of contest that afternoon. Not emotional, not dramatic, just precise. Claim of wrongful exclusion. Demand for valuation. Request for injunction against asset restructuring until resolution. My father called me within an hour. "This is unnecessary," he said, his voice tight. "You're turning family into a legal battlefield." "No," I said. "You did that when you took away my choice." He hung up. At work, the atmosphere changed immediately. Meetings canceled, decisions delayed. Daniel stopped copying me on emails. I didn't protest. Instead, I sent Laura another folder. She called me that night, her voice sharper now. Focused. "Evelyn," she said, "do you realize what you've been doing?" "What?" "You've been acting as a de facto executive without the title. For years, and they documented it." I closed my eyes. "Good or bad?" I asked. She exhaled. "Very good." But then she added, "There's more." "What kind of more?" "I found something in the company's past filings. Something your father never disclosed to you." My grip tightened on the phone. "What?" I asked. "A trust," she said. "Established by your grandfather. With conditions." "What conditions?" She paused. "Conditions that may explain exactly why they're trying to erase you now." And just like that, the story shifted again. I didn't ask Laura to explain the trust over the phone. Not because I wasn't curious, but because I knew instinctively that whatever she'd found wasn't something I should hear standing in my kitchen, barefoot, with my laptop open and the hum of my refrigerator filling the silence. Some information changes how you see your entire past. You deserve to be seated for that. We met the next morning. Laura slid a thin manila folder across the table between us. No dramatic buildup, no raised eyebrows. Just facts, arranged neatly, the way the law prefers them. "This trust was established by your grandfather, Samuel Hartman, in 1989, she said. 2 years before he officially retired from the company. It's a conditional family trust tied directly to ownership and control of Hartman and Company. I opened the folder. Typed pages. Legal language. My grandfather's signature at the bottom of the first document. I hadn't seen his handwriting in years. What kind of conditions? I asked. Laura folded her hands. Succession conditions. My stomach tightened. The trust stipulates that control of the company passes only if the successor demonstrates operational competence and ethical stewardship, she continued. It's not automatic. It's not gender-based. And it's not based on birth order. I looked up. Then how is it decided? There's a clause, she said, tapping the page, that allows the trustee to evaluate contribution over a 10-year period prior to transfer of majority control. I flipped pages, dates, benchmarks, language about profitability, labor practices, vendor relationships. This wasn't vague. It was precise. And who's the trustee? I asked. Laura hesitated for half a second, just long enough for me to notice. My grandmother, I said. Yes, Laura confirmed. Margaret Hartman, your grandfather's widow. My grandmother had been quiet my entire life. Polite, observant, always seated slightly apart at family gatherings. She listened more than she spoke. I'd always assumed she was disengaged from the business. Apparently, I was wrong. She's still alive? I asked. Yes, 91. Residing in an assisted living facility in Minnesota. I stared at the document again. Why didn't I know about this? Because you weren't meant to, Laura said gently. And neither was Daniel. That sentence settled like a weight. The trust also includes this, she added, sliding another page forward. If the trustee believes the company is being consolidated to avoid evaluation, she can freeze transfers and trigger a formal review. I felt a slow, unfamiliar sensation rise in my chest. Leverage. So my father reducing my stake, I said carefully. That could be seen as consolidation. Yes, Laura replied, especially if it removes a contributor whose record would complicate the evaluation. I leaned back in my chair. Pieces began sliding into place. The timing, the secrecy, the urgency. They weren't just sidelining me. They were protecting Daniel. Does my grandmother know this is happening? I asked. Laura shook her head. Not yet. According to records, she hasn't been notified of any recent amendments, which is required. I laughed once, quietly. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. My family had spent years treating me like background support, all while my grandfather had quietly ensured no one could inherit his life's work without earning it. What happens if she finds out? I asked. Laura met my eyes. Everything stops. The next few days were a study in contrast. At work, I was invisible. Daniel stopped asking my opinion altogether. My father communicated with me exclusively through short, polite emails. At home, I worked late into the night compiling documentation. Laura's checklist grew longer. Vendor testimonials, profit margin analyses, internal communications showing decision-making authority. Every file told the same story. I hadn't just supported the company. I had carried it. On Friday evening, my phone rang. My mother. "Your father's very upset," she said without greeting. "This legal approach is tearing the family apart." "I didn't tear anything," I replied. I responded. There was a pause. "We never meant to hurt you." "That's not the same as not hurting me," I said. She sighed. "Why can't you just trust us?" I thought of the trust, the document my grandfather had created, precisely because trust wasn't enough. "I trusted you," I said. "That's why this happened." She didn't reply. The following Monday, Laura called me into her office again. "I've sent a formal notice to the trustee," she said. My heart skipped. My grandmother? Yes. Certified letter. Full disclosure. What happens now? We wait. Waiting, it turns out, is its own kind of confrontation. 2 days passed, then 3. On Thursday afternoon, my assistant knocked on my office door. "There's a call for you," she said. "A Margaret Hartman." I stared at her. "Put it through." The voice on the other end was thin, but clear. "Evelyn," she said. "It's your grandmother." I hadn't heard her voice in years. "Hi, Grandma." "I received a letter," she continued, "from a lawyer." I swallowed. Yes. She didn't sound angry or confused. She sounded alert. "Is it true," she asked, "that your name was removed from ownership?" "Yes," I said, "without my knowledge." There was a long pause. "Your grandfather would be disappointed," she said quietly. Something inside me tightened. "I need you to come see me," she continued. "There are things I want to understand." "When?" I asked. "Tomorrow," she said. "I've already arranged transportation." After the call ended, I sat at my desk, hands folded, breathing slowly. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about truth surfacing after years of being buried. That night, Daniel showed up at my apartment, unannounced. He looked different, less confident, his voice sharper. "What are you doing?" he demanded. I didn't invite him in. "I'm protecting myself," I said. "You're dragging Grandma into this," he snapped. "She's old. She doesn't need stress." "She wrote the trust," I replied. "She's not fragile." He scoffed. "You're really going to take this that far?" I looked at him steadily. "You already did." He stared at me, then said the words I would never forget. "You were never supposed to be in charge." There it was. Not an argument, not confusion, a belief. I nodded once. "Thank you for finally saying it out loud." He left without another word. The next morning, as I drove north toward Minnesota, I realized something. For years, I'd thought the worst betrayal was exclusion. I was wrong. The worst betrayal was discovering how long everyone had been comfortable with my erasure. And by the time I reached my grandmother's facility, I knew this meeting would change everything. Because once the person holding the truth decides to speak, no amount of family silence can contain it. My grandmother's assisted living facility sat on the edge of a frozen lake outside Duluth. Quiet in a way that felt deliberate. The kind of place where time slowed. Not because nothing happened, but because everything mattered. Margaret Hartman was waiting for me in a small sitting room with tall windows and pale blue curtains. She wore a gray cardigan and pearl earrings. Her posture was straight. Her eyes were sharp. She gestured for me to sit. "You look tired," she said. "I am," I replied honestly. She nodded, as if that confirmed something she already knew. "You've been tired a long time." That was the first crack. Not in her composure, in mine. She reached for a folder on the table between us, thicker than the one Laura had shown me, worn at the edges. "This," she said, tapping it, "is the part of the family history your father doesn't like to discuss." She opened it. Inside were handwritten notes, old board minutes, letters between her and my grandfather. "Samuel never trusted inheritance without accountability," she continued. "He watched too many men destroy good companies because they believed blood entitled them to power." I swallowed. "He never said any of this to me." "He wasn't meant to," she said. "Not until the right moment." She slid one document toward me. My name was on it, dated 8 years earlier. "What is this?" I asked. "A performance addendum," she replied. "I've been tracking your contributions for years, quietly." My chest tightened. "Why?" "Because you reminded me of myself," she said simply. "Invisible, useful, underestimated." I looked up. "You?" She smiled faintly. "I ran the books for this company for 25 years. Your grandfather took the credit. It was the era. I accepted it. But I made sure the next generation wouldn't be erased so easily." I didn't know what to say. "Your father knows about the trust," she went on. "He's known since it was created. Daniel does not." "Then why would my father risk triggering it?" I asked. Margaret's expression hardened. "Because he believes I won't act." The room felt suddenly smaller. "He believes age makes me irrelevant," she continued. "He believes silence equals consent. And he believes you'll do what you've always done." "What's that?" I asked. She met my eyes. "Absorb the loss." I sat back, the weight of her words settling into my bones. "I won't," I said. She nodded once. "Good." She closed the folder. "I've already contacted the trustee board." "There's a board?" I asked. 3 members, she replied. "Independent. Required by the trust. They'll initiate a formal review." "What does that mean for the company?" I asked. "It means your father loses unilateral control," she said. "Temporarily." "And Daniel?" Margaret's gaze softened slightly. "Daniel will be evaluated on merit alone." I exhaled slowly. "He won't pass." "No," she agreed. "He won't." There was no malice in her voice, just fact. We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the lake was still. "I didn't come here to take anything from them," I said quietly. "I just wanted what was fair." Margaret reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Her grip was firm. "Fairness is not theft," she said, "and truth is not betrayal." When I left the facility 2 hours later, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Grounded. That feeling didn't last long. By the time I reached my car, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Missed calls, texts, voicemails. From my father, my mother, Daniel. I drove halfway home before pulling over to listen. The first voicemail was from my father. "What have you done?" His voice was tight with panic. "The board just called an emergency meeting. This is outrageous." The second was from my mother, crying. "Your grandmother is confused. She doesn't understand the consequences. Please fix this." The third was Daniel. Short, sharp. "You're burning everything down." I didn't respond. The emergency board meeting happened without me. I wasn't invited. I didn't need to be. By evening, Laura called. "They're furious," she said, "and scared." "What happens now?" I asked. "A formal audit," she replied. "Full review of operations, governance, and succession. They'll look at everything." I closed my eyes. "Including me." "Especially you," she said. "Your father's attorneys are already trying to frame you as a disgruntled employee." I almost smiled. "That won't work." "No," Laura agreed. "It won't." The next week was chaos. Auditors arrived at the company. Files were requested. Interviews scheduled. Daniel stumbled through his first formal review, unprepared for questions about contracts he'd never negotiated and processes he didn't understand. I was interviewed last. The lead auditor was a woman in her late 50s, with calm eyes and a legal pad she barely glanced at. "Miss Hartman," she said, "do you believe you were excluded intentionally?" "Yes," I replied. "Why?" "Because my presence complicates the narrative that control belongs to my brother," I said evenly. "And because I was easier to remove quietly." She nodded, writing something down. "Do you still want to work for the company?" she asked. I paused. "For now," I said. "Until my role is defined, honestly." She looked up at me then. "That's a rare answer." "It's an honest one," I replied. That night, my father came to my apartment. He didn't knock. He rang the bell repeatedly until I opened the door. "You've humiliated us," he said, stepping inside without invitation. "I told you not to come here," I said. He ignored that. "Your grandmother has no idea what she's doing." "She knows exactly what she's doing," I replied. "You're forcing my hand," he snapped. I met his gaze. "You forced mine first." His voice dropped. "If this review goes through, it will destroy the company." "No," I said calmly. "It will reveal it." He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time, not as his daughter, as a threat. "This isn't over," he said. I nodded. "I know." After he left, I sat on my couch, heart steady, hands still. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to their decisions. I was shaping the outcome. And as the audit moved forward, one truth became impossible to ignore. They had underestimated not just my silence. They had underestimated what happens when the person holding everything together finally lets go. The audit didn't explode the way people expect things to explode in stories like this. There were no shouting matches in conference rooms, no dramatic firings, no police at the door. What happened was quieter and far more damaging. It started with calendars. The auditors requested 6 years of executive calendars, meeting notes, and approval trails. Not just titles, but patterns. Who initiated decisions? Who followed up? Who closed? Daniel's calendar was light, sparse, a scattering of lunches, golf outings, conferences he attended but never summarized. Mine was dense, layered, meetings stacked on meetings, vendor calls at dawn, crisis notes at midnight, follow-ups attached to everything. When the auditors asked Daniel to walk them through a major supplier transition from 3 years ago, he froze. "I wasn't directly involved," he said, glancing toward me without looking at me. They didn't look impressed. When they asked me, I pulled out a binder. Dates, emails, signed contracts, risk assessments. I didn't speak more than necessary. I didn't editorialize. I let the paper talk. That was my advantage. I had never needed applause. I had needed things to work. By the end of the second week, the mood inside Hartman and Company had shifted. Employees whispered. Managers avoided Daniel's office. People who had once deferred to him began bringing questions to me again, out of habit, out of trust. My father noticed. He stopped pretending this was a misunderstanding. He called Laura, not to negotiate, to intimidate. "She's destabilizing the company," he told her, his voice sharp enough that she could hear it through the phone when she later recounted the call to me. "This review needs to end," Laura had replied calmly. "It will end when the facts are clear." Facts were never his strong suit. At home, my phone stayed silent. My mother didn't call. My brother didn't text. The family group chat went dark. That silence hurt more than their anger had, because it confirmed something I'd always known but never admitted to myself. My value to them had been conditional. Useful meant welcome. Assertive meant disposable. On the third Friday of the audit, the board requested individual statements regarding future intentions. "What do you want from this company?" the chairwoman asked me during my session. It was the first time anyone in authority had ever asked me that question directly. "I want my work to be acknowledged accurately," I said. "And I want my stake to reflect my contribution." She nodded. "And if that doesn't happen?" I didn't hesitate. "Then I leave." That answer surprised her. I could see it. "Why stay at all?" she asked. "Because I helped build it," I said. "And because I won't be erased quietly." When Daniel's turn came, he asked for clarity and support. When my father spoke, he framed everything as generational misunderstanding and accused unnamed advisors of stirring conflict. The auditors didn't respond to that. They responded to numbers. On Monday morning, Laura called me earlier than usual. "They've completed preliminary findings," she said, "and they're not good for your father." I sat at my kitchen table, coffee untouched. "How not good?" "The review shows a pattern of misrepresentation," she said. "Your father consistently attributed strategic decisions to Daniel that were documented as yours." I closed my eyes. "Additionally," she continued, "they flagged your removal from ownership as an attempt to manipulate succession evaluation." My breath caught. "What happens now?" I asked. "The trustee board has options," Laura said. "They can reinstate your stake. They can restructure leadership, or they can force a sale." A forced sale would devastate my father. The company wasn't just his livelihood. It was his identity. I felt no satisfaction at that thought, only resolve. That afternoon, my grandmother called. "I've read the interim report," she said. "And?" I asked. "And I'm disappointed," she replied, but not surprised. There was a pause. "I want to meet with you and your father," she continued. "Together." My stomach tightened. "Are you sure that's wise?" "It's necessary," she said. "This family has hidden behind politeness long enough." The meeting was scheduled for Wednesday. In the meantime, something unexpected happened. An email arrived from the board's legal counsel, addressed to me directly. Subject line: confidential opportunity. The message was brief. "Given the findings of the audit and the trust provisions, the board would like to discuss potential leadership pathways with you, independent of current family dynamics." I read it twice. They weren't just correcting the past. They were planning a future. I didn't tell my father. I didn't tell Daniel. I forwarded it to Laura. Her reply came quickly. "Do not respond yet. This changes everything." Wednesday arrived heavy and gray. We met at the same assisted living facility where I'd spoken to my grandmother days earlier. Neutral ground, public space, witnesses nearby. My father arrived first. He looked older, smaller. The confidence he'd worn like armor for decades had cracked. Daniel arrived next. He avoided my eyes. My grandmother was wheeled in last. Calm, centered. She didn't waste time. "I built safeguards into this company because I knew men like you would assume entitlement," she said to my father. "And because I hoped someone like Evelyn would survive long enough to use them." My father's jaw tightened. "This is a betrayal." "No," she said. "This is accountability." She turned to me. "Do you know why your grandfather insisted on documentation?" I shook my head. "Because silence protects the powerful," she said. "Paper protects the truth." She faced my father again. "You will reinstate Evelyn's ownership immediately," she said, "or I will trigger the next clause." "What clause?" Daniel asked sharply. "The one that removes you both from control," she replied. The room went very still. My father looked at me then, not with anger, with something closer to fear. "You would really do this?" he asked. I answered calmly, "I already have." Because what they still didn't understand was this. The moment they tried to erase me, they gave me permission to stop protecting them. And once that protection was gone, the truth didn't need my voice. It had its own. They reinstated my ownership the next morning. No apology, no family meeting, just a revised filing, submitted quietly. My name restored to its original percentage, as if nothing had happened, as if I wouldn't notice the difference. Laura called me the moment it went through. "They're trying to contain the damage," she said. "Reversal without acknowledgement. Classic." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "What about leadership?" "That's where it gets interesting," she replied. "The board isn't satisfied. Neither was I. Restoring my stake didn't undo the intent behind its removal. It didn't address the years of misrepresentation. It didn't resolve the deeper issue of control, disguised as family loyalty. At work, Daniel avoided me entirely. My father remained in his office with the door closed, emerging only when necessary. Employees noticed. Power shifts always announce themselves in silence before they become official. 2 days later, the board requested another meeting. This one included only me, Laura, the auditors, and the independent trustees. No family. That alone told me where this was heading. The chairwoman leaned forward. "Ms. Hartman, based on our findings, we're prepared to make a recommendation." I waited. "We believe Hartman & Company requires leadership restructuring to ensure long-term stability and compliance with the trust." She paused. "Specifically, we recommend removing your father from the CEO role and appointing an interim executive." I felt a flicker of something in my chest. Not triumph, not shock. I had seen this coming. "And Daniel?" I asked. "He does not meet the criteria for succession at this time," she said evenly. "His role would be reassessed." The room was quiet. "Who would the interim executive be?" I asked. She didn't answer immediately. She slid a folder across the table. My name was on the front. "This is not an offer," she said. "It's a possibility, pending your consent and a formal transition plan." I didn't open the folder. "I need time," I said. "Of course," she replied. "But understand this. If you decline, the board may appoint an external executive. That would change everything. An outsider would strip the company for efficiency, sell off pieces, cut long-time employees." I thought of the factory floor, of the people who trusted me. "I'll review it," I said. That evening, my father called. "I hear they made you an offer," he said. His voice wasn't angry. It was tired. "They discussed possibilities," I replied. He exhaled. "You don't understand what you're risking." "I understand exactly what I'm risking," I said. "I've been risking it for years." Silence. "I built this company," he said quietly. "You inherited it," I replied. "I built what it became." That landed harder than I expected. There was a long pause. "You're my daughter," he said. "This isn't how family works." I closed my eyes. Family isn't supposed to work by erasing one member to preserve another. He didn't respond. The next morning, my mother appeared at my apartment door. She looked fragile, smaller than I remembered. For the first time, she wasn't performing. "I don't recognize you," she said, sitting on my couch. "That's because you've never seen me without permission," I replied. She flinched. "We raised you to be strong," she said. "You raised me to be agreeable," I said. "There's a difference." Tears filled her eyes. "Your father is lost without the company." I softened, just a little. He made it his whole identity. That wasn't my choice. She reached for my hand. I let her. "Please don't take this from him," she whispered. I met her gaze. "I'm not taking anything. I'm stopping him from taking from me." That night, I opened the folder. The offer outlined an interim CEO position with full operational authority, subject to a performance review after 18 months. It included safeguards, oversight, clear metrics. It wasn't power for power's sake. It was responsibility. Laura came over, wine unopened between us. "This is the moment," she said, "not the reinstatement. This." "I know," I replied. "You don't owe them mercy," she added. "I'm not acting out of revenge," I said. "I'm acting out of necessity." She smiled. "That's what makes it effective." The following day, I met with my grandmother again. She listened as I explained the offer. "And what do you want?" she asked. "I want the company to survive without sacrificing my dignity," I said. She nodded. "Then accept." "What about my father?" I asked. "He will learn who he is without control," she said. "That lesson is long overdue." I signed the consent form that afternoon. The announcement went out internally the next morning. Effective immediately, Evelyn Hartman would assume the role of interim chief executive officer of Hartman and Company, reporting to the board. My father's name was listed as stepping down by mutual agreement. Daniel's title was changed to Director of Business Development. The reactions were immediate. Some congratulatory, some stunned, some silent. Daniel cornered me in the hallway. "You planned this," he said, his voice low. I replied. "You're tearing this family apart," he hissed. I looked at him steadily. It was already broken. I just stopped pretending it wasn't. He walked away. That evening, as I sat alone in my new office, the weight of the role settled in. I wasn't celebrating. I was preparing. Because the hardest part of taking power isn't the moment you receive it. It's what you choose to do once you have it. And I was about to make decisions that would force everyone, including myself, to confront the cost of control. The first thing I did as interim CEO was not make a speech. I didn't call an all-hands meeting. I didn't send out a long email explaining my vision or thanking people for their support. Those things would come later, if they were earned. Instead, I asked for reports, real ones. Not summaries polished for executives, but raw numbers, overtime logs, vendor performance breakdowns, safety incident records, customer complaint histories. I wanted to see the company the way it actually functioned, not the way my father had liked to describe it at dinner parties. What I saw made one thing painfully clear. The company had survived on competence in spite of leadership, not because of it. Costs were creeping upward in quiet places no one had audited in years. Daniel's department had approved marketing initiatives that never translated into measurable returns. Longtime suppliers were underpaid and overextended because no one with authority had bothered to renegotiate contracts responsibly. When I asked Daniel for clarification on a six-figure consulting expense, he couldn't explain it. It was strategic, he said. Strategic how? I asked. He shrugged. It was recommended. By whom? I don't remember. I closed the file. Find out. That was the difference. I didn't accuse. I asked. Within a week, inefficiencies that had been tolerated for years were exposed. Not dramatically, methodically. Employees noticed. Not because I announced changes, but because I showed up. On the floor, in the warehouse, in the back offices no one from leadership had visited in years. People spoke to me differently than they ever had to my father or brother. Not deferentially, honestly. "Thank you for asking," one supervisor told me quietly after explaining a long-standing safety concern that had been ignored. No one ever did before. That stayed with me. At home, the silence continued. My father didn't call. My mother sent one text, asking if I was taking care of myself. Daniel avoided me completely. The family I had protected for years had retreated, leaving me alone with the consequences of their choices. It hurt more than I expected. Not because I doubted my decisions, but because loss doesn't always announce itself as loss. Sometimes it just removes familiar noise and leaves you with space you never wanted. 2 weeks into my role, Laura called. "Your father has retained separate counsel," she said. I exhaled slowly. "For what?" "Contingency planning," she replied. "In case the board makes your position permanent." I leaned back in my chair. "He's preparing to fight." "Yes," she said. "Not you. The board. The trust." That was worse. If he challenged the trust, he would fracture the company publicly. Lawsuits, headlines, investor panic. He'd burn everything down rather than let go, I said. Laura was quiet for a moment. "Are you surprised?" "No, I wasn't." That afternoon, I received an email from Daniel. Subject line, "We need to talk." I didn't reply. He showed up at my office instead. "This can't go on," he said, standing in the doorway like a stranger. "Close the door," I said. He did. "You've turned everyone against us," he said. "I didn't," I replied. "I stopped shielding you." His jaw tightened. "You think you're better than us." "I think I'm responsible," I said. "There's a difference." He laughed bitterly. "You always needed to be right." I met his eyes. "No, I needed to be heard." He looked away. "I never asked for this," he said quietly. "That's the problem," I replied. "You assumed it would come anyway." He sank into the chair across from me. For the first time, he looked uncertain. "What do you want?" he asked. I considered the question. I want transparency, I said, and accountability from everyone, including you. And if I can't give you that, he asked, then you won't have a place here, I said. He flinched. You'd fire your own brother? I'd hold a director accountable, I replied. Family has nothing to do with it anymore. He stood. You've changed. I nodded. I had to. After he left, I sat alone for a long time. Power didn't feel the way I'd imagined. It wasn't exhilarating. It was isolating. That evening, my grandmother called. You're doing well, she said. I'm doing what needs to be done, I replied. That's what leadership is, she said. Not being liked, being clear. I hesitated. Did you ever regret it? Regret what? Choosing truth over peace, I said. She paused. Peace built on silence is just delayed conflict. The next week, the board scheduled a vote, not on my performance, on the future structure of the company. Laura briefed me beforehand. They're considering splitting ownership from leadership permanently, she said. Professional governance, clear separation. That would end the family dynasty, I said. Yes, she replied, and protect the company. The vote would determine whether Hartman and Company remained a family business in practice, not just name. My father's lawyer requested to speak at the meeting. So did I. The night before, I barely slept. Not from fear, from understanding the weight of what was coming. If I spoke honestly, I would sever something that could never be repaired. But if I didn't, I would become complicit in the very control I had fought to escape. The morning of the vote, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I didn't see a daughter. I saw a decision maker. And for the first time in my life, I chose not to ask for permission because the cost of silence had already been paid. Now, it was time to collect the truth. The board meeting was held in a conference room I had walked past 1,000 times without ever being invited into. That alone felt symbolic. Long table, neutral walls, a screen at one end displaying the company logo like it was watching us. The trustees sat along one side. The auditors were present but silent. Laura sat beside me, a thin legal pad in front of her, pen untouched. My father arrived last. He didn't look at me. He took his seat, flanked by his attorney, a man I didn't recognize. Younger, aggressive posture. The kind of lawyer hired to win, not to understand. The chairwoman opened the meeting without ceremony. This session concerns the governance structure of Hartman & Co. going forward, she said. Specifically, the separation of ownership from operational control. My father's lawyer stood immediately. With respect, he said, this company has always been family-run. Any attempt to dismantle that tradition would undermine its identity. The chairwoman nodded. You'll have your time. He sat, tight-lipped. Then she turned to me. Ms. Hartman, you asked to speak. I stood. For a moment, I didn't say anything. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted the room to feel the pause. The absence of noise where assumptions usually lived. I've worked for this company since I was 20, I began. Not because I was obligated, but because I believed in it. I kept my voice steady, measured. For years, I accepted that my role would be invisible, that my contributions would be attributed elsewhere, that ownership and authority were things I wasn't meant to want. I looked at my father then. He stared straight ahead. But when my name was removed from ownership without my consent, something became clear to me, I continued. This wasn't about protecting the company. It was about preserving control. The lawyer shifted in his seat. I don't believe family leadership is inherently flawed, I said. But I do believe unchecked power is. I turned slightly, addressing the trustees. The audit showed what many of you already suspected, that competence and authority have not been aligned here. That decisions were made for optics, not outcomes. I paused. I'm not asking you to punish anyone, I said. I'm asking you to protect the company from the very dynamics that nearly broke it. Silence followed. Not uncomfortable, intent. The chairwoman nodded once. Thank you. She turned to my father's lawyer. You may speak. He rose again. This so-called audit ignores decades of successful leadership, he said. Mr. Hartman built this company into what it is today. I spoke without standing. He inherited it. The lawyer glared. And maintained it. At the expense of transparency, I replied calmly. The chairwoman raised a hand. Enough, she addressed the board. We'll proceed to vote. I sat back, heart steady. I had said what needed to be said. Whatever happened next was out of my hands. One by one, the trustees cast their votes. The decision passed. Unanimous. Effective immediately, Hartman and Company would adopt a governance model, separating ownership from executive leadership. A professional board would oversee operations. Family members could hold positions only if qualified and reviewed independently. My father closed his eyes. Daniel wasn't present. He'd declined to attend. The chairwoman continued. Ms. Hartman will remain interim CEO during the transition period. I didn't react. My father stood abruptly. This is an overreach, he said. You're dismantling a legacy. No, the chairwoman replied evenly. We're preserving it. He looked at me then. Really looked at me. You could have stopped this, he said quietly. I met his gaze. So could you. He left without another word. The aftermath was swift. News of the governance change spread quickly, though carefully. Investors responded positively. Longtime partners expressed relief. Employees, surprisingly, seemed calmer. Stability doesn't come from familiarity. It comes from clarity. That evening, I sat alone in my office. Lights dimmed, the city quiet outside. Laura broke the silence. You did well. I didn't win, I said. She smiled faintly. You reclaimed agency. That's rarer. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother. I don't know how to talk to you anymore. I stared at the screen. Then I typed back. Start with honesty. She didn't reply. Later that night, Daniel called. I didn't think you'd go this far, he said. I didn't either, I replied. But I didn't think you'd let them erase me. Silence. I don't know who we are now, he said finally. That's the point, I replied. We get to find out. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not relief. Space. The kind that comes after a storm. When the air clears and you realize you're still standing. The company was changing. My family was changing. I was changing. And for the first time, none of it was happening to me. It was happening because of me. But the hardest part was still ahead. Because restructuring a company is one thing. Restructuring relationships built on decades of control is another entirely. And not everyone was willing to let go without a final attempt to pull me back into silence. The retaliation didn't come loudly. It arrived the way control always does when it's losing ground. Through back channels, whispered warnings, and attempts to rewrite the narrative before the ink is dry. 3 days after the board vote, Laura called me early. Your father filed a motion, she said. Not against the company. Against you. I was already dressed, coffee untouched on the counter. For what? Breach of fiduciary duty, she replied. He's claiming you acted out of personal interest to dismantle family control. I closed my eyes slowly. He's saying I hurt the company. Yes, she said. By protecting it. I let out a breath. Where is this filed? County Civil Court, she said. It won't go far. But it's not about winning. It's about intimidation, I said. Exactly. That morning, the story leaked. Not the real one. A softer, more poisonous version. A local business blog published an article with the headline, Family Rift Shakes Hartman and Company Leadership. The piece framed me as the ambitious daughter who turned to lawyers instead of loyalty. It quoted an unnamed family source, expressing concern about my emotional motivations. I didn't need to guess who that was. By noon, my inbox was full. Some messages supportive, others cautious. A few clearly fishing for weakness. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I asked Laura to set a meeting with a judge. Not for the lawsuit, for something else. When you grow up being underestimated, you learn where the real power lives. It's not in who speaks the loudest. It's in who files first, who documents best, and who understands timing. My father had accused me of breaching fiduciary duty, so I decided to formalize mine. That afternoon, I signed an affidavit detailing my actions as interim CEO. Every decision, every safeguard, every board directive followed to the letter. Then I did something my father never expected. I requested an independent judicial review of the transition, voluntarily. Laura raised an eyebrow when I suggested it. You're inviting scrutiny. Yes, I said, because I have nothing to hide. That move changed the temperature immediately. People who thrive on manipulation depend on secrecy. Transparency starves them. The court scheduled a preliminary hearing within 10 days. My father's lawyer called Laura that night. "He didn't think you'd do that," Laura told me afterward. "Good," I said. "I'm done playing the version of me he understands." At home, the emotional cost finally caught up with me. One evening, I opened a drawer and found an old photo. My brother and me at the factory when we were kids. Daniel grinning, me serious even then, holding a clipboard too big for my hands. We'd both started in the same place. Somewhere along the way, the rules changed for only one of us. I didn't hate him, but I no longer protected him from the consequences of his comfort. The hearing came quickly. Small courtroom, fluorescent lights, wooden benches worn smooth by decades of quiet disputes. My father sat on one side with his attorney. He looked rigid, controlled, like a man bracing for impact. I sat with Laura, posture relaxed. The judge was a woman in her early 60s, calm, direct, the kind of authority that doesn't need volume. She listened. My father's attorney spoke first. He painted a picture of betrayal, of a daughter who used legal technicalities to seize power, a family drama masquerading as corporate reform. When it was our turn, Laura stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize. She presented facts. Board votes, audit findings, trust provisions, governance requirements, my affidavit. Then the judge turned to me. "Miss Hartman," she said, "do you believe your actions served your personal interest or the company's?" I met her gaze. "Both," I said. And those interests aligned for the first time. The judge studied me. "Explain." "For years," I continued, "I subordinated my professional judgment to preserve family harmony. That harmed the company. When I stopped doing that, both improved." The courtroom was silent. The judge nodded once. "I see no evidence of breach," she said. "I see evidence of long overdue governance." She dismissed my father's motion, just like that. Outside the courtroom, my father approached me. His face wasn't angry now. It was hollow. "You didn't have to humiliate me," he said. I looked at him steadily. "I didn't humiliate you. I stopped hiding your choices." He opened his mouth, then closed it. "I hope it was worth it," he said finally. I thought about the nights I'd stayed late, the promotions I'd watched pass me by, the way my name had vanished from a document that defined my future. "It wasn't about worth," I said. "It was about dignity." He turned and walked away. That evening, I received a message from the board. Subject line: Permanent Appointment Discussion. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I sat on my balcony as the sun set, city lights blinking on, one by one. I realized something then. The revenge wasn't the lawsuit failing, or the board vote, or even my father's loss of control. The real revenge was this: I no longer needed their approval to move forward. And that freedom came with a choice I hadn't expected to have, because now, for the first time, I wasn't fighting to stay. I was deciding whether I wanted to. I didn't open the board's email until the next morning, not because I was afraid of what it said, but because I wanted to read it as someone with options, not obligations. Permanent appointment discussion. That phrase would have thrilled me once. Validation, recognition, proof that everything I'd endured had finally paid off. Instead, it made me pause. I'd spent so long fighting to be seen inside a system that was designed to look through me that I hadn't stopped to ask a harder question. What did I actually want now that I could choose? I forwarded the email to Laura with a simple note: "Meeting next week." Her reply came almost immediately. "Good. We need leverage, not urgency." At the office, the mood was different. Lighter, but cautious. People watched me more closely now, not out of suspicion, but recalibration. Power had moved, and everyone was adjusting their footing. Daniel was on leave. Officially, strategic reassessment. Unofficially, he'd been sidelined until the board decided what to do with him. My father hadn't been back since the hearing. For the first time, the company felt like a workplace instead of a family battlefield. That's when the letter arrived. Not an email, not a message through counsel. A handwritten envelope delivered to my apartment. The return address was my mother's handwriting. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time before opening it. Inside were 2 pages. She didn't start with an apology. She started with a confession. "I've spent most of my life confusing peace with obedience," she wrote. I thought keeping everyone calm meant I was keeping the family together. I read slowly. She wrote about watching my father dominate every decision, about seeing Daniel rewarded for potential while I was relied on for results, about knowing it was unfair and choosing silence because challenging it felt too dangerous. I told myself you didn't mind, she wrote, that you were strong enough to carry it. I see now how cruel that was. My chest tightened. I don't know how to be your mother without asking you to make yourself smaller, she continued. I'm trying to learn. There was no demand, no request for reconciliation. Just an ending. I love you. Even if I don't know how to show it yet. I folded the letter carefully and set it aside. That night, I dreamed about the factory, about walking through empty rooms filled with machines that were still humming, as if the work continued even when no one was watching. When I woke up, I understood something I'd been avoiding. The company wasn't the only thing that needed restructuring. So did my definition of loyalty. The board meeting was held the following Tuesday. Same room, same table, different stakes. The chairwoman didn't waste time. We'd like to offer you the permanent CEO position, she said, with full authority under the new governance model. She slid the contract across the table. It was comprehensive, fair, protective. Laura reviewed it line by line, her expression neutral. What's the term? I asked. 5 years, the chairwoman replied, with performance-based renewal. And family involvement? I asked. Limited, she said, including your father and brother. I nodded. And if I decline? I asked. She held my gaze. Then we appoint an external executive. There it was, the choice. If I stayed, I could protect what I'd built, shape the culture, ensure no one else was erased the way I had been. If I left, I'd finally be free of the system that had demanded my silence for so long. Laura leaned in slightly. You don't owe them your future. I looked at the contract again. I'll need time, I said. The chairwoman nodded. Take it, but not too long. That afternoon, Daniel called. I heard about the offer, he said. Yes, I replied. I won't fight you, he said. I know I can't. That surprised me. I just wanted to say, he continued, I didn't realize how much you carried until it was gone. I believed him. And I hated that it took loss for clarity to arrive. Take care of yourself, he added. You too, I said. When the call ended, I sat alone in my office and looked out the window. For years, I'd thought the end of this story would be about winning. I was wrong. It was about choosing. And the most radical choice I could make now wasn't staying to prove I deserved a seat at the table. It was deciding whether I still wanted to sit there at all. That evening, Laura sent me one last message. Whatever you choose, make sure it's yours. I stared at the city lights as night fell, contract untouched on my desk. Because the final act of taking back control isn't revenge. It's deciding what you refuse to carry anymore. And by morning, I would know whether my future lived inside the walls I'd fought so hard to protect, or beyond them. I slept better than I had in weeks. Not because I'd made a decision, but because for the first time, I wasn't being pulled in opposite directions by fear and obligation. The noise had quieted. What remained was a single, steady question. What does a life look like when it's not built around proving something to people who refuse to see you? I went for a walk that morning instead of going straight to the office. It was early, cold, the kind of Midwest morning that clears your head whether you want it to or not. As I walked, I thought about all the versions of myself I'd been. The daughter who stayed quiet to keep the peace. The sister who carried responsibility without authority. The executive who worked twice as hard to be taken half as seriously. Every version had been shaped by the same assumption, that if I left, everything would fall apart. But it hadn't. The company was stable, the board was competent. Systems were finally in place that didn't depend on one person absorbing everyone else's mistakes. That mattered. When I arrived at the office, Laura was already there. You look calm, she said. I am, I replied. Which tells me something. She nodded. That you're not reacting anymore. Exactly. We sat in my office, contract still untouched on the desk. If you stay, Laura said carefully, you'll be effective, probably exceptional. You'll change the culture. And if I leave? I asked. You'll be free, she said. And you'll still have leverage. Your track record doesn't disappear just because you step away. I looked at the window again. "What would you do?" I asked her. She smiled slightly. "I'm a lawyer. I fight systems from the inside. But you've already done that. You don't owe them another transformation." At noon, my grandmother called. "I hear they want to make it permanent," she said. "Yes," I replied. "And what do you want?" I hesitated, then told her the truth. "I don't want my life to revolve around proving I belong." She was quiet for a moment. "Then don't," she said. "You already did." That afternoon, I asked the board for one more meeting, not to negotiate terms, to state conditions. We met the next day. "I'm grateful for the offer," I began, "and I believe in the governance changes you've made." The chairwoman listened carefully. "But I won't accept the permanent CEO role," I continued. "Not because I'm incapable, because my value doesn't depend on staying in a system that needed crisis to recognize it." There was no reaction at first. "I will, however," I added, "stay through the transition period, 6 months, to ensure stability, train leadership, and protect employees." The chairwoman leaned back. "And after that, I step away," I said, "with my ownership intact." Laura watched their faces shift. This wasn't rejection, it was control. "We'd like you to reconsider," one trustee said. "I have," I replied. They exchanged glances. "Very well," the chairwoman said finally. "We accept your term." When the meeting ended, I felt something lift. Not relief. Closure. The news traveled fast. Some people were confused, some disappointed, a few quietly impressed. My father didn't call. Daniel sent a short message. "I think this is the bravest thing you've done." I didn't respond right away. That evening, my mother called. "I heard you're leaving," she said. "I am," I replied. There was a pause. "Does that mean you're leaving us too?" I chose my words carefully. "It means I'm no longer organizing my life around what makes this family comfortable." She was quiet. "I'd like to try again," she said softly. "If you'll let me." "I'm open to that," I said. Slowly, with boundaries. "I understand," she replied. And for the first time, I believed her. Over the next weeks, I did exactly what I said I would. I documented everything, built teams, delegated authority, made sure no single person held silent control again. I trained my successor, an external executive with no family ties and no patience for old dynamics. The company didn't just survive, it breathed. On my last day, I cleared my office slowly. No speeches, no ceremony. As I walked out, I passed the conference room where this had all begun. For a moment, I stopped. Then I kept going, because the point was never to win the room. It was to stop needing it. And as I stepped into the elevator, I realized the most powerful thing I'd done wasn't taking control of the company. It was knowing when to let it go. I didn't tell anyone where I went on my first Monday after leaving Hartman and Company. Not because it was a secret, but because for the first time in my adult life, my whereabouts didn't need to be justified by productivity. I drove north, past the factory, past the familiar exits I'd taken for years, until the road opened and the noise thinned. I stopped at a small diner I'd never noticed before, ordered coffee I didn't rush through, and sat by the window, watching strangers live lives that had nothing to do with my last name. It felt strange, quiet, honest. 6 months later, the company announced record stability. Not growth fueled by pressure or optics, but steady performance built on systems that worked without heroics. The new CEO sent me a short email. 3 sentences. Clear, respectful. He didn't need me. That was the point. My ownership remained. Passive, clean, protected by governance, not goodwill. I wasn't erased. I also wasn't consumed. My relationship with my family changed slowly, unevenly. My father never apologized. I stopped waiting for it. We spoke occasionally, carefully. He learned who he was without the company. It wasn't graceful, but it was real. Daniel found his footing elsewhere. A smaller firm, less prestige, more responsibility. We spoke on holidays, neutral ground, no roles to perform. My mother tried the hardest. She stumbled, she overcorrected, but she listened when I said no, and that mattered more than perfect behavior. My grandmother passed away that winter. At her service, the trust was mentioned only briefly. Most people spoke about her kindness, her patience, her quiet strength. I knew the fuller truth. She hadn't been quiet.
She'd been precise.
After everything, people still ask me if this was revenge.
It wasn't.
Revenge is about making someone else feel the pain they gave you. This was about refusing to keep carrying it. I didn't expose secrets for spectacle. I didn't scream or threaten. I didn't demand apologies or force confessions. I watched. I documented. I chose. I stopped confusing love with access, loyalty with silence, and family with control. That's what changed everything. If you've ever been excluded from a will you helped build, sidelined in a family business, ignored at a wedding, forgotten at Christmas, or told you were too emotional when you asked for fairness, I want you to hear this clearly. You're not difficult. You're inconvenient to systems that benefit from your compliance. The moment you stop explaining yourself, the tables turn. The moment you put things in writing, call a lawyer, draw a boundary, or walk away with your dignity intact, the narrative shifts. Not because you became cruel, because you became clear. I didn't burn anything down. I stepped out of the fire. And what survived didn't need me to disappear to stand. If this story felt familiar, if it mirrored a family drama, a betrayal, an inheritance fight, a workplace injustice, or a moment when you realized love was being used as leverage, I see you. Your boundaries are not negotiable. Your silence is not required. Your value does not need consensus. If you're watching this on YouTube and this story resonated, take a moment to like the video. It helps more than you think. Drop a comment and tell me what part hit closest to home, or what choice you would have made. And if you want more stories like this about karma, payback, family betrayal, and the quiet power of choosing yourself, subscribe and turn on notifications. Some stories end with apologies. Others end with freedom. This one ended with both, in the only order that ever works.